Builder, our awesome hosts, for a great location. The timing's really good. I'm sure you all saw the news. We have a new female CEO at Career Builder, which couldn't go better with the event that we're having. I've got a couple notes here for myself. Thank you all for coming. I'm Harry Evans, one of the folks that puts this all together, along with Ben, Alicia, a bunch of our other staff that we have in the group today. So thank you for everybody that puts it together. And just to explain to anybody who's new to the ESF what we are, a lot of people use the term sales community. And that can mean a sales event, it could mean a trade show, it can mean sticking a lot of business cards in each other's faces. What we don't see as much is the sales world bringing together what they do, their tactics, their stories and experiences, and essentially just those little things that you try to find either in a mentor or a good boss. There's a lot of that out there, and it's very hard to find it. So we wanted to build that community a little bit closer, give that an environment where we can talk a little bit freely, where we can have a Q&A with real experts that really know what they're talking about, that can actually give you insights and save you years of figuring out the hard way. So in a nutshell, that's the Enterprise Sales Forum. We are a global group. We have chapters all over the country and the world. And so if you're in other cities, if you're ever interested in being a guest speaker, or of course if you ever just want to bring your team or friends to an event like this, please let us know. We're always trying to grow the event in terms of who's running it and who's showing up. And the best way to do that is word of mouth. So share our invites, share what's going on, and let us know how else we can help. That being said, I don't want to talk too much because we have people that are a lot more interesting than me here. I'm going to let Alicia introduce our speakers today, but one quick note that I wanted to make before I go, make sure you come to our next event as well. We've got amazing speakers today, and our next speaker as well, I'm sure you've all seen him before. Anthony Inario is somebody that has not done a lot of public appearances. I believe this is his first or second of the year. They're usually not free, and he's doing a debut for his new book. So it's going to be a major event. We have a great turnout today. We're expecting another one next month. Please show up, and if you have a large team, let us know how we can get you maybe a promo code or something like that to bring a large group a little more reasonably. With that, thank you, Ben, for putting this all together. Alicia, I'll let you take it away and introduce the speakers.
Awesome. Well, I'm not going to introduce them because, frankly, I think they're going to be like way better at telling you guys who they are than I would be. So let's just kind of go down the line. Pooja, you want to kick us off?
Sure. First of all, welcome to Career Builder. We're so excited that you were able to join us today. My name is Pooja Rios, and I am the Vice President of Sales for our new client acquisition department here at Career Builder. I am also the founder and chairwoman of our Women's Alliance, Career Build Her. So as our intro speaker discussed, having a female CEO is probably one of the greatest things that's ever happened to our company. And I'm very excited to share my exceptional fails during the course of my career with all of you today. There's a lot.
I'm Alita Marina-Wolf, and I run my own company. I run a company called Ethos. We help growing and growth stage companies achieve profitability and scale by investing in their people and culture. I certainly have a lot of sales fails, especially because I don't consider myself a true salesperson, even though I do 100% of the sales for my own company, and in my previous firm also did 100% of the sales. So I will be able to talk to you, hopefully very candidly, about what not to do as you move forward in your own sales organizations.
Okay. Hi, I'm Katie Cantwell, and I'm the Director of Sales at Showpad here in Chicago. As I've been thinking about failure and this panel, I vacillated between feeling like I've never failed before and, and wait, I have too many failures to count. So hopefully I'll be able to find some sort of nugget there in the middle.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Yeah, so this is going to be super conversational. We'll definitely leave some time for like official formal Q&A at the end. But really it's going to be like conversational because I think there's something to be learned from everything. And just a quick intro, I'm Alicia. I work for a Finnish startup that you haven't yet heard of, but you will. And our company's name is Leadfeeder. So let's just get started. So you guys all kind of highlighted your current role or responsibilities. So why don't we just start with like something like pretty meaty? Like if you had to highlight one of your favorite fails, something that you feel happened that at the time was just like detrimental, but now looking back, you're like, I'm so glad that that happened to me. Like, who wants to take a stab at this one first?
So I think everybody saw this in the email, in the promotional emails, but I'll share this because it's a story I tell pretty frequently. So when I launched my business, day 2 of my business, I was invited to a lunch with a very prominent woman in the business community. She'd been the CEO of 2 Fortune 500 companies. And she emailed me to say she wanted to help me. She wanted to help me drum up leads and drum up business, and she wanted to just support me overall. She wanted to encourage me in my path being a female leader. There weren't enough of us. That's what she said. So I go to this lunch, and I think it's a mentor meeting. And so I kind of pour out my heart and soul in this meeting, and I'm telling her everything that I believe in my business, but again, it's day 2. So there's not very much going on in the business, right? But I'm telling her all of the advantages that I see in the market and all of the challenges, and I'm very honest with her, and I say, what I'm trying to do right now is collect information because I don't even know what I don't know. And so I'm so excited to be here with you so I can learn from you. She was a very well-known sales CEO, so I figured she could really help me. She looked at me, and she said, you have no experience and limited credibility, and you should either go join another company or go back to school. And again, day 2 of my business. This is one of the more important people that I've met with. And so I took that moment and I looked back at her and I really wanted to clam up. I really wanted to either tell her why she was wrong and lay out my whole business plan, or just stop talking and end the lunch early and leave. But instead, I said to her, what would you do if you were me right now? What would you say to you? And so she spent the next 30 minutes telling me all the things that I should have said. And I realized that it was a sales meeting and not a mentor meeting. And that was the tremendous challenge in this experience. That was the failure, a misinterpretation of why we were there together. But why I look at it as a favorite failure is in listening to her tell me what she would have needed to hear, I realized my business had all of those things. The problem was I didn't have the package. All of the contents were there, but I didn't have a story yet. And so when I went into my first very big sales meeting that week, on that Friday, I told a story in the way that she had told me she would have wanted to hear a story, and I closed that client in the meeting, and they were my first client, and they're still my second biggest client. And so the reason I think that that was such a pivotal moment for me was, one, I think a key to being successful in sales is listening and understanding motive and why people are there in a room together, understanding the why, but also listening to what people are saying to you in that context, being able to reframe, and having a certain level of humility when you are in a situation like that so that you can learn and do better for the next prospect, even if that meeting isn't going well. But the other thing is, it was a very important story for me in learning the power of story. One thing that comes up a lot, if you look at the science of motivation or influence, is that the most powerful tool for sales is actually anecdote. So if you look at the financial crisis, there's a big econometrics book called The Black Swan by Nassim Taleb. He lays out in that book why we believed what we believed, even though the data showed that we were headed towards a recession, and the answer was all of the stories were positive. We believe in stories. If I had told her my story, I would have given her most of what she had wanted. And when I did tell my story, I was able to close that client.
Thanks, Alita. That's awesome. Either of you want to highlight a favorite fail?
I have one. That's a really great story. I'm like processing right now. But I think my fail that I would highlight is quite a bit more tactical. And part of the things that I've struggled with over the course of my career and indeed my life is that I'm really someone who's extremely enthusiastic, and I love a challenge, and I love to jump in with both feet. And quite often I jump in without ever taking anything into consideration about building like an infrastructure, or how am I going to support whatever I'm starting with, be it growing a sales team or starting a new job, or in this particular case, starting a business. And at a point in my life when I had little kids, I had 4 kids under the age of 5, I decided it would be a super great idea to start a catering business. So with that level of enthusiasm, it took off like nothing. Like people were dying. I was like super busy and it was going really well. But I never really took that step back to say, okay, what infrastructure do I need to put in place? Like, how am I billing these people? How am I pricing things? How am I going to like calendarize my engagements? Things like that. And in pretty short order, but like in a month, I had a phone call from a neighbor who was like, yeah, my daughter's first communion's today. Where are you? And I totally missed it. Like I literally missed the first communion that I was supposed to cook for. So that is, as I was kind of reflecting on this, I'm like, it's giving me hives talking about it now. Like, that was a really big failure, but I learned a lot. Like I learned, like even now as I'm in a completely different chapter of my life, I still draw learnings from that as I'm embarking on new endeavors with my team and with new companies and growing revenue, I've learned about myself that it's really important to take that step back and figure out, like, how am I actually going to do this, and what are the steps I'm going to take, and how am I going to be purposeful about this growth.
We're just coming in hot. Pooja, do you want to share a favorite fail, or do you want to?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have grown up in the corporate world. I've been in corporate since I was 19. I'm not going to tell you how old I am. You can figure that out on your own. But I have been in corporate for a really long time. And one of the things I learned really on is that anytime I asked for something, a promotion or the next step, like, I always had to have the financials to back it, right? And so when I was a national sales rep here at Career Builder, like, I knew that leadership was my next step. And so I marched right into our CSO's office and was like, listen, I understand that, there's an opening on our largest revenue driving team right now, and I want you to consider me for the role because of X, Y, and Z of how I produce. And he just looked at me almost like I had two heads, and I was like, first of all, like, I never even knew you were interested in leadership. Second, I am not trusting you to run one of my largest revenue producing teams unless you decide to run one of my smaller revenue producing teams. And the only way for you to do that is to get up and move across the country. And so I remember going home and talking to my husband, and I was just like, well, this is ridiculous. Like, I have numbers to back up everything I'm doing. But what I didn't realize is that I didn't have leadership experience to have our CSO actually trust me to run one of our largest revenue producing teams. So off I went, blind as a bat, to Charlotte, North Carolina with my husband from Chicago. I'm a native New Yorker, not the best move in life, and ever. And off we went. I was like, there's an opening, we're leaving. And so my husband and I packed up and we moved to Charlotte, North Carolina to run the Carolinas. And I had no idea what I was walking into. I was walking into my team, which was the Bad News Bears. It was number 28 of 28 offices in the country. They were on what I affectionately coined Southern time. So they would come into the office at 9 and leave by 4. And it was amazing. And then on top of it all, like, the $30 million that they had in run rate was essentially all at risk. And so, but because I wanted to show our CSO that I was so great at what I could do, I decided to take on this venture literally eyes closed. And so I remember 90 days in, I looked at my husband and I was like, we are not gonna make this work. And my career is over. Like, it is over. And we are gonna be here in Charlotte, North Carolina for the rest of our lives. And so, not that there's anything wrong with that, but for a native New Yorker, it's just not my thing, So, so at day 90, my husband looked at me and he's like, you need to regroup and formulate a plan. And that's what you're gonna need to do, and you're gonna need to kind of reset the entire structure of what is happening in Charlotte, North Carolina. So, 12 months later, I was really happy to say that the office went from 28 to 5. I was promoted into the Chicago leadership role, running one of our largest revenue producing teams. But I will tell you that that was one of the toughest years of my entire career. I knew that we were being looked at by a microscope, like, literally every day. And I had to really dig deep into what I knew to be good sales methodology to get my team to run effectively, combating the cultural norms that were currently existent. So I'm really happy I did it. I'm obviously here I am today, but my husband, I remember when I'll tell you the best part of the whole story. So my husband is a native Chicagoan, all right, born and raised Bears fan, all of that stuff. Let's not talk about the game on Sunday. That's a whole nother ball of wax. But I flew back to Chicago. I'm like, listen, I'm going to be interviewing for this job. I don't know if I'm going to get it or not. So I call him at 7 p.m. I'm like, listen, I'm on the plane. I got the job. He's like, listen, I was going home with or without you. Like, whether you got the job or not, I was going back to Chicago. So, like, it was a multiple fail on multiple angles, marriage, work, relationship, all of that, but thankfully it all worked out.
That's awesome, you guys. See, so anything that we have, like, going on, like, it's all learning experience, right? Cool. All right. So Katie, I have a question for you. So what if, yeah, I'm gonna start calling out. So what, if any, right, early career experiences do you feel that were instrumental in your road to sales success? And, like, what I mean by that is, like, yeah, we just talked about our favorite fail, but what would you say is, like, one of the most impactful lessons that you learned when you were just starting in sales that you feel like you take into your role today, that you share with your teams when you're coaching? Like, yeah.
I have an answer for that, actually. So I think one of the biggest things that I've learned over the years is to separate, and my team is all going to nod because we talk about this all the time, but to separate the emotion from the business. And that was something that I think I certainly struggled with a lot in my early sales days, and I think women in general, not just women, but specifically women, struggle with that because I think our nature is to be more relationship driven and more emotionally driven. And so it's really easy when we hear that no to say, okay, I don't want you to feel bad about saying no to me, so I'm just going to walk away. And also, you know, sales is hard. Sales is kind of a series of a roller coaster of wins and failures. And so to be able to remove the emotional weight of all of that has been tremendously helpful to me as a leader and also as an individual contributor. And so I think that's the most valuable thing I've learned over the years, to not engage on an emotional level with what happens to me during my work day.
So what tips would you have though for somebody who is emotionally driven, like to help them to work on that soft skill of letting themselves be removed from the emotion in the business?
Yeah, I've become a lot more data driven over the years and a lot more focused on quantifiables rather than gut feelings and how I feel about things. I'm much more driven by like measurable steps in a deal cycle, for example. We talk about forecasting a lot on my team, and forecasting can be a very emotional experience, right? But really, when you boil it down to quantifiable steps and quantifiable markers in a deal, it takes the emotion out of it. So I think that's really where both my sales process and methodology and my career process and methodology has kind of boiled down to now. Just really quantifiable steps and quantifiable metrics on what success looks like.
That's good feedback. That's great. Do either of you guys want to take a stab at that one too?
Very similarly, I think the best lesson I learned early on in my career was understanding financials, right? And so I think a lot of times, regardless of where you are in your career or what position you have inside of your company or running your own business, the financials are literally your make or break it, right? And so everything that I learned when I worked at Xerox right out of college was that financials run an entire organization, and that's how decisions are made. And so the sooner you start understanding basic financials, the better your life is going to be. And to Katie's point, once you understand those financials, you can very quickly quantify the type of work that you're doing inside of your company, or when you're starting your own business, is your business actually moving forward when you understand the ins and outs of financials.
Just adding to that, when I started my business, probably the best advice that I got from an individual who had built his business, a services business, to about $100 million in an acquisition, he said, you need to become best friends with your CFO. And this is something that entrepreneurs don't understand, that they need to become best friends with their CFO, and you have to have a really good CFO and a trustworthy one. So the first thing that I did was I focused on who could be that thought partner on my financials, who could help bolster how I felt about it, because I am not a traditional entrepreneur. There is a term that gets thrown around. I came from venture capital. So I've always looked at financing, I've always looked at numbers, I've always actually been responsible for returns on investment. But I thought about it in terms of, I'm putting an investment in through my organization. We have to help this company grow to hit certain marks so that we can get back returns, right? Because when you work in venture capital, you have 10 companies, you expect 9 to fail and 1 to pay back the rest. So you have to make a lot of these deliberate decisions. And so I'd come from strategy around financials, but not necessarily on revenue generation in the same traditional way, because while I built out our partnership system, which was essentially sales in my venture capital firm, it was always said that if I needed to step away from partnerships, that was fine, as long as I could maintain the growth of our companies so that we could reap those returns. So I was very much focused on financial engineering when I came into my business. And to give you a sense, I have budgets out for the next 5 years for a company that is 5 people. That's crazy. Nobody has that. Before I even launched my business, I had 3 years of projections. But I, one, had to understand who that thought partner should be. So I was talking to my friend who runs her own company, but previously had been a head of sales in an agency. And she said, you need to meet with this person because I think he's going to be good for you. He's the only person I've ever talked to who's made me feel calm about money and calm about numbers. And I needed that because one of the things that happened to me, I had actually started out in a sales role in my first job, and I hit all of my numbers, actually exceeded all of my numbers, but I was having panic attacks all the time. I just could not handle it. I could not handle the stress from having to hit those numbers because of the relationship that I had to money personally, which was that I'm the oldest person alive. I've maxed out like all of my retirement accounts now. Like I just like constantly don't spend any money on anything. It's not a way to run a business. It's also not a growth mindset to get new business. So when I found a thought partner who is literally one of the calmest people that you'll ever meet in your entire life, my CFO is this Brazilian man who never thinks anything is on fire. And that was very helpful for me because I could understand the numbers in a detached, emotionless way, right? That was a huge part for me. And then the second thing was understanding what my desired outcome was because I was getting too buried in the minutia of what numbers I wanted to hit. So I would write down on a piece of paper that I wanted to have X amount of sales that month, and I would kill myself getting it, and I wouldn't enjoy the work. So I would go back to, what is it that I am trying to achieve? What is my why in this situation? And okay, what do I need to hit to get there? And that really transformed my relationship to my numbers as well. And with my company, we're already at 200% of our projected goal for this year. And I really ascribe it to that mindset shift. This idea of what is it that I am trying to achieve? What is the broader purpose? What am I trying to power? As opposed to what numbers am I trying to hit? Because I have thought much less transactionally and much more strategically as a result.
Awesome, thanks guys. Okay, so let's kind of shift gears a little bit about like personal development. So we all want to make ourselves better, right? Like we all want to get better at our jobs, our lives, all these different things. So let's talk about like maybe books, development courses, maybe we can even loop in like mentorship, like your thoughts on mentorship, maybe like how you find a mentor. We'll just keep it kind of conversational with that theme in mind, and whoever wants to kind of take a stab at it.
I'll start because I have so much to say on this topic. So, how many of you read in this room? Great, you read. How many of you read every day? How many of you read every day to perfect your craft? Okay, so looking at the hands in the room, that last question, only 4 people raise their hand, right? And so when it comes to professional development, you actually have to continuously learn to be best at your craft, right? So if you are in sales, one of the things that I learned a long time ago is I learn in really small snippets of information. So for me, reading the Wall Street Journal business section was like perfect amount of read for me every single day, right? Because that's how I absorb information and content. And I think that a lot of people miss the boat is like, when you found something that you absolutely love to do, you need to continuously perfect that over and over and over again. And for me, reading the Wall Street Journal business section, obviously I'm in sales, and we sell to small companies all the way up to Fortune 100 companies. I needed to really start understanding what happened in the business world. So that's like a first, like something you can do every single day. It'll take you 15 minutes. You'll walk away that much smarter, right? The second thing is that in order to continue to learn, you have to have book references that you're actually going to draw out of, whether you're an individual contributor or you're working towards running your own team or running your own business. And so for me, again, I learned in small snippets. So the best sales book and generalized book that I read is The Little Red Book of Selling. How many of you have read that book? Great, like 4 of you. The rest of you, pick it up. It's like a really good read that you can reference over and over and over again. I just feel like sometimes like when we spend so much time in school and then we graduate and then we start our first job, we automatically forget that we have to be continuous learners and continue to perfect our craft over and over and over again to make us better. That's it.
So I have a tremendous amount of resources that I can share on this that I'm going to try to hold back. So I would appreciate if you would interrupt me when I've talked too long. That would be important to me. So to start, so I read 2 books a week. It is not some kind of competitive situation. People always think that. I am very rigid and structured and high strung, and it is the only time that I turn off. And the way that I respond well to making change in my life is setting rules. I know that about myself. If I set a rule, I'll follow it, which means that the only way that I'm gonna lie down and not keep working is to read, then I should read 2 books a week, because it'll mean that I actually rest. So with that in mind, some books that I would immediately recommend to everybody in this room. One is Influence by Robert Cialdini. And it is a book that is both a sales and marketing book. One of the things that it will teach you is 1, the importance of value creation, but 2, the importance of reciprocity. We are wired to give gifts when we have received them. If you've ever wondered why Hare Krishnas are so successful, it's that when they put that flower in your hand, you have a response psychologically and on a neurological level to give them something back, because they have not asked you for money in response. If you want to perfect your craft, you have to understand the psychology of how people operate in order to actually make that happen. Similarly, Derek Halpern has a blog called Social Triggers, which is again the psychology around sales that I would highly recommend. Give and Take by Adam Grant is my favorite sales book that I've ever read, because it made me feel good about myself, because I have always been told that I give too much in sales situations, and that I don't use powerful enough language. I ask more questions than I make statements. And what that book shows is that top performing salespeople are givers naturally, because it is about a relationship. It is about a relationship where you create value and trust. So those are a few resources. If you want to be a good salesperson, you have to learn how to actively listen. And active listening is a technique that was developed by Carl Rogers and Richard Farson in 1957 out of the University of Chicago. The whole purpose was to facilitate better collaboration. It's 3 steps, really simple. The first is listening for all cues. So that means not just content, but context. What is body language? What is tone? What is energy level? You have to understand what is happening fully with a person. I will tell you that my most successful sale that I ever had was somebody who told me no in the meeting, and I said, okay, but how are you doing today? What's going on? And that lead cried in our meeting and became a client, because we developed a relationship, because I was not just there for the transaction. I wanted to understand her. I wanted to know her. And that was ultimately how that developed. The second part of active listening is called paraphrasing. So that does not mean saying back to the person exactly what they have said. It means actually paraphrasing. So what is your interpretation? So you may say to that person, it seems to me that you're very frustrated today because of X problem. Am I getting that right? And then the third piece is noting all the cues. That's different from listening to all the cues, because it's happening on a moment-to-moment basis. Noting all the cues is actually your overall impression of the conversation. What did you ultimately take away? Most of us are passive listeners. We listen to hear. You should be listening to understand. It's another technique. Third thing, anybody heard of the PEL triangle by any chance? It's my favorite performance-based model. By the way, I was a performance coach for 3 years. That's why I like this question. So the PEL triangle is really simple. So with the PEL triangle, you have 3 sides. The top of it, though, is achievement, performance. And we mostly focus on achievement or performance in what we do, and that's what leads to burnout, that's what leads to mistakes, and that's what leads to us getting stuck, which is why we need to go down to E, which is experience. Do you enjoy what you're doing? Do you enjoy the experience of what you're doing? If you don't, you're probably on a spectrum if it's too challenging and you need more tools, or it's too easy and you need to make it more interesting. And then the last piece is learning. You have to continuously learn in order to get out of being stuck. If you focus just on the P and the E, you'll be stuck in the present. You won't be able to move on to the future. So use the PEL triangle. And the last piece, anybody here ever take a class with Craig Wortman? I see a few people nodding, raising hands. He was at the University of Chicago. Now he runs the Sales Institute at Kellogg. He has an online course on Coursera, which is on entrepreneurial selling. I have personally gone through courses with him. Everything that he says is gold and genius and perfect, so listen to everything that he says. But one of the things that is the simplest that I use and that never fails me is a PBC, purpose benefit check. Every sales meeting that you have, what is the purpose of the meeting? What is the benefit to both parties? Is that okay with everyone? Is there anything else we have to add? Those are tools and resources. If you want more books or podcasts or resources or classes, literally I spend all of my time absorbing information, so I'd be happy to share those with you. But like I said, I don't want to monopolize the whole panel. So
we're going to also have a book talk later. Well, I think we all have that in common, that we read a lot. I read a lot too, and I kind of, for a long time, forced myself to read like either a fun book and then a business book and a fun, like sort of get a cadence together because otherwise I would just be reading scary books all the time. But for me, when you read at that sort of cadence, I felt like the business books and the sales books were getting a little redundant. So I discovered Blinkist, which is an app that you can subscribe to, and I love it because it boils down the business books, the top best-selling books, to what they call blinks, so like salient points, and you can fire through a book like, name a book, probably the book she just described, in like 10 minutes, like literally, and it just gives you the highest level points. It's like Cliff Notes, but a podcast, and it's fabulous. So I take the train from Milwaukee every day, so I go through at least 1 or 2 Blinkist books a day, and it's great. My biggest challenge is putting that all into practice, though. So for many years, I've worked with a Sandler coach. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Sandler sales methodology. So that's been a game changer for me because that takes the theory of sales and sales methodology in this particular school, and meeting with a coach, for a long time I met with this guy once a week, and meeting with him and drilling down into either what my team was doing or what my deals were doing, and applying all of that was a huge, huge game changer because it took all of that from theory and really helped me apply it and put it into practice. So I think that there's kind of 2 parts to that personal development. I mean, we can all read and read and read and read and read, but unless we're actually converting that to action, it doesn't really mean anything. So for me, it took some accountability and actually paying someone to force me to do things, but it worked.
Personal trainer.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great, guys. So let's shift gears a little bit around like growth and lead with management and like building your team and all of this fun stuff that you have to think about like when you're in that leadership role, because you're not just a manager of your own contributions, you've got all these other people that are around you. And so what I'd be curious to know, and I think everybody would be curious to know, is like what do you look for when you're building out a team? Like what are some of the main things that you look for, qualities, attributes in the individuals that you're bringing? Yeah.
Well, so I started at Chopet in June, and I was offered a really unique opportunity, which was a really big reason I took the job. I had really 3 salespeople out of 10 on my team that were in place. So I basically had a blank slate. And it was, I mean, who could pass that up, right? So I could like draw my own, I could figure out what I wanted in my team. And it was a really great experience to be able to sit back and decide what qualities I was looking for and then interview for those qualities. And so knowing that our speed to ramp was really, really fast, and that the expectation was to be hitting a certain number in a very, very short order. Mainly what I was looking for is someone who was really able to hustle, and that's pretty much what I got, so thank God. But I think that when I'm hiring a mid-market sales executive, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that hunger and that ability to sort of a sense of urgency, right? Because not only am I looking for someone who can build a pipeline and manage that pipeline, but I'm also looking for someone who's going to have that sense of urgency in getting the deals closed. So it's kind of like, you can find someone who can build a pipeline, you can find someone who can close deals. I'm looking for that person who can do both. And so someone who's super accountable and that sense of urgency I harp on all the time. I think that's really, really important.
So I'm in a very similar situation. So our new client acquisition is basically finding new clients, and it's all new market share. And so if you look at like the trajectory of most organizations and companies, like that is not something that they're good at. Like you acquire a customer, which takes you a really long time, and then you take that customer and then you expand the services that you have with the current customer. So a year ago, our then CEO said to me, like, listen, we want you to start this new client acquisition team. We've tried it twice before, it's failed. And headcount doesn't grow on trees, so here are the people you're gonna get, off you go, right? And so one of the things that I had to really quickly hone in on was what was the type of person that could truly hunt new business. And hunting is just a very different mentality than more of like an expand sale. And so for me, I had to figure out like what was our ideal candidate profile for a pure hunter, right? Someone who was very metrics driven, could come in, pitch, and move on. Because in our role, we have so many accounts that it's it's all about speed and volume. And so what I realized at the end of the day was that all of the reps and the leaders that I have inside of my department all have the exact same quality, and this is what it is. They have grit. Like, they will come in every single day and they will overachieve the metrics that we set for them, and that's how our group is still in existence a year later and doubling in size. And then the second thing that every single one of them has is like passion for our company and what we do and what we take to market. And I believe that they truly have that because they found purpose in our employment brand, which is putting people back to work. And even though the unemployment rate is at 3.7%, there are still so many individuals here in the United States who still don't have the employment or at optimal employment that they should be at. And so once you find someone, for me, who had the grit portion of it, and then believe that like what we were taking to market was very purposely driven, that's when I found like the perfect caliber of 80 sales reps and leaders to keep us in existence a year later.
So my whole company's purpose is to build company culture, and a huge part of that is helping my companies design roles and the processes to bring those people into roles. So one of the things that I will say is don't talk about personality type, don't think about personality type. That is a form of discrimination, and depending on the state that you're in, it's illegal. So be careful with that, and I tell that to my clients all the time. But what I will say is there are a few factors that I think come up for all of the companies that I work with. Remember, I work in technology, I've grown up in technology. There are two, you may have heard of them, you may have not, so I'm gonna ask you to be interactive. How many people here have heard of AQ, agility quotient? Few of you have heard of it. Okay, agility quotient is basically how adaptable, how agile you are. So just like we have EQ and we have IQ, so intelligence quotient, emotional quotient, right? Agility quotient is how you can adapt to change, how quickly you can learn, how responsive you are to change. Some people will dig their heels in, some people will look at every situation and shift. And they will say, how do I learn, how do I grow, how do I mold, how do I fit, how do I find a solution? This is increasingly one of the things that companies look for the most. There are now assessments in it. There are now companies that use AQ as a way of determining performance bonuses and salary bands. I don't totally agree with that because I think it ends up being personality type based as opposed to true AQ, which is regardless of your personality, how do you respond to change? So AQ is something that is being looked at very firmly by companies across the board. And if you ask people who don't even know what it is, so like I do all the time, so I ask CEOs, what do they look for in their employees? And the same thing is true across all teams, and that's adaptability. Can they come into the office and deal with the unknown? And if they can, and if they can come out on the other side, that's what makes our business thrive because of the climate that we're in today and because of the amount of change that we're seeing because of technology. The other thing is called CQ. Anybody know what this is? CQ? Curiosity quotient. So one of the things that I firmly believe is that our next generation of leaders are learners. So at the end of the day, Kevin Kelly writes about this actually in The Inevitable. There's a whole chapter, 13, on questioning. It's about the power of questions. And basically what CQ says is that in our information age, the answer doesn't matter because the answer can be delivered to you by your search engine or by any number of tools. That's what a superficial layer of artificial intelligence does. It is intelligence that underlies everything that we do. But what AI can't do, even though it can beat us at Go and chess, is ask better questions. We can ask better questions. Curiosity quotient is, can you learn a new skill? Can you learn a new thinking pattern all the time? Can you ask better questions? Can you ask the questions that don't have answers yet? That is extremely valuable, especially when we're, again, in this place where we don't know where careers are gonna go, where people are going to be. So those are the two things that I think if you can demonstrate that in your roles, you will accelerate and you will excel. Because if you think about the people that you admire, your role models, the people who changed the game, who broke through the ceiling, they were people who could respond to change most likely, who didn't say we're gonna do things the way they've always been done, and they were people who were questioners, who fundamentally knew that there was a better way, but were humble enough to admit they didn't have the answer yet and went out and sought it.
Whew. Mic drop. Yeah, I was gonna actually, so I have a whole bunch more questions, obviously. You know, you wanna over-prepare, right? But why don't we kind of start taking a couple of questions? You guys quote that from our audience. Okay, cool. Yeah, go ahead. You gotta project, right?
Hello everyone, my name is Scott. we are talking about the attributes of the sales talents you are looking for. The sales talents, they might have different skills. Some of them are very good at offline sales, which means they do the sales at the front end. And some sales talents may be good at doing the online sales efforts. This person might be shy, but they can do very good sales work online and back end. So what kind of focus do you have when you're looking for those sales talents at this moment?
I think that to your point, like sales is not the traditional sales that it was, if you look at like Glengarry Glen Ross or Wolf of Wall Street, right? I love all those sales movies. But you're right that like sales and sales methodology has evolved. And so when you look at a client nowadays, you know that a client has typically done all the research on you way before you even get to them, right? And so to your point, we actually need combination sellers. So we need sellers who are really analytical and know that, hey, I already know my client's done all the research about my company and the product that I'm trying to sell already. Like I know that already. And so part of that is, how do I use a dual prong strategy, which we usually, like in my group, in general sales methodology is called 3x3 or 5x5. And so what that means is that you are going to 3x3 what part you're good at. So it's either gonna be, we call it click, call, click, or we call it call, click, call, right? So what that means is, if you have a salesperson who's good at online type of sales, they're gonna be the person who's going to use the email, not really comfortable with the call, I'm gonna go back on the email, I'm gonna set the appointment, I'm gonna run it, right? But then I have people that are super boisterous, like typical what you would see in Wolf of Wall Street, those individuals are people who are way better, they're extroverted, so they're way better on the phone. And so what we have to work with them on is the polar opposite side of that, of how do we get you to become slightly more analytical so that you can communicate both on the phone and you can also communicate via email and through research and through data. And so to answer your question, which one am I looking for? I want both. Like I love a super balanced sales force. If you look at the way my sales force is today and you met them, you would very, very easily be able to delineate who, and actually one of them, my ex-sales employees in this room today, Tom, there you are, buddy, right in the front row.
Call them our brothers,
Oh,
but it's okay.
The Hardy brothers. But my point is that like I want both, right? I need both because, and even if you look at my leadership team of 5 leaders that run all of these salespeople, they are vastly different individuals. But in order to sell in this type of environment, when you know that your client already knows everything that they possibly need to know about you, you need both sides of the brain, which means both sides of salespeople to get the sale done. So I hope that answers your question, but I hire for both.
I think that also we're in a really unique spot right now where we have AI and a lot of automation coming into the sales process, and we're starting to sort of figure out how do we balance the human aspect of sales with all of that, artificial and automated part of sales. And I'm seeing more and more that it's less about the personality of the salesperson and more about the technical skill in sales. And by that I mean the way they're able to assert themselves as authority in their knowledge base and whatever they're selling, and assert themselves sort of an authority. Like I like to think of my salespeople as physicians, right? Like I get sold to all the time, and I'm not going to respond to the salesperson who is, relying on their personality to build rapport. Those days are gone, like you said. Like by the time you're talking to a prospect, that person knows everything about your project, your whole company.
Exactly.
So your personality is not going to get you anywhere anymore. Like you really have to be an authority in what you're selling, and you have to take control of that conversation. And I think that that's what sets apart the stronger salespeople from the people who are less successful, because they're able to assert some control over the process and assert some, not to go all Wolf of Wall Street, but sort of like some dominance.
Kind of have to be that way every once in a while.
I was gonna say.
So I almost feel like the
challenges
pendulum
though.
is swinging that direction a little bit more than we hope it is, because we have to overcome that automated piece of the deal cycle.
And I'll add one more thing to that, sorry. But like one of the things that we have to realize in this technology-driven era is that like every single prospect, and even you all, like your average attention span is 3 to 5 seconds, right? It's like someone laughed because they think it's true, and I know it's true, right? And so we know that like in that 3 to 5 seconds of email communication, LinkedIn communication, phone communication, you have to grab that client knowing that they already did the research, and to Katie's point, like really owning the space that you're in. And so part of that again goes back to, and you're gonna hear me say this 200 million times, is becoming that student of your business, right? And knowing your business inside and out. Because when you don't, that's how quickly you'll lose the sale.
Right. You're not gonna grab your client by, becoming their buddy or,
No.
we all get those like,
No.
those emails, right, from the business development people that are like trying to build rapport, but the chord is not struck because it's like, okay, you're creeping me out right now. Like,
Right.
I don't wanna be your friend, I want information about your company. I don't really want to learn about what you majored in college and how that might relate to me.
Exactly.
And then the one thing I'll add, so I help my companies build their sales organizations, and that's a big part of what we do. We do the role design, and we do the evaluation around performance and then career progression. So how do these people perform? And so the thing that I've seen consistently across the 14 companies that I've done assessments on is this. The best salespeople on their teams, regardless of their specialization, who they focus on, what types of accounts, if they are focusing on SMBs or more enterprise accounts, it doesn't really matter. They understand both the business and how to make whatever they're selling personalized to the customer. And that's something that comes up all the time. So when they are talking to the customer, yes, they are absolutely the experts on the business and on the business line or the product or the service. But the other component is they can ask the right questions up front, those discovery questions, to understand exactly what that customer needs, what the pain point is, get to the root cause, and then explain how the solution will be the best solution in market to solve the problem. And they're very adept at doing this. And one of the things that I'll point out is probably the best salesperson in terms of just pure numbers that I've seen in any of my companies. This particular company is only a $33 million company, but still. This person is one of the most reticent, quiet people that you've ever met. But the questions that he asks on the phone and in person convince that person themselves that they are selling themselves on the product. So what happens is he'll just ask questions, and you can hear it happening because I've watched these videos of how he's doing it. The customer, the prospect in this situation is saying why they should be buying this product in response to the questions, and that's all he's doing. He's just getting, the best salesperson in the world is your customer, because your customer is the decision maker. No matter how charismatic you are to the personality point, or even how much you know about the business, you need to be able to get that customer to understand that this is the solution for them. So I think the personalization, the customization, and the thoughtfulness that goes into it really matters regardless of whether you're doing online or offline, the size of accounts you're managing, whether you're going out for new business or upselling existing business. How do you get that person to convince themselves that this is the right offering?
Awesome. Harry? I think Harry has a
Question about AQ and CQ. I love the terms. I've been trying to sum that up for a long time, and that's a much easier way to do it. So with IQ particularly, and maybe you'll tell me I'm not right on this, but it's something that's pretty, most people think is pretty fixed. So are AQ and CQ fixed? And if not, how would you go about training those to be stronger? Because they're severely missing in a lot of, especially new talent in the industry.
Yeah, for sure. So just, IQ is not fixed, but a lot of tests are fundamentally biased, and there's a lot of issues with intelligence quotient tests that have been brought up. So if you don't have a certain type of education, or if you're not used to certain kinds of puzzles or problem solving, you can actually build up your scores for an IQ test. You can train in those puzzles. It's kind of like the SAT, where the questions that you get asked are going to be the questions that you get asked. So if you wanted a higher IQ score, you could get it. So there's always a certain amount of engineering. But the beautiful thing about AQ and CQ, both of them, yes, are absolutely skills that can be trained. And I will just say this really quickly. Sorry, I really love neuroscience. Anybody here familiar with myelin? Myelin looks like beads beads on a string. It's in your brain. It's what makes your bioelectrical signals fire more accurately and more quickly. So essentially, it's what makes you a genius. When they autopsied Einstein's brain, what they found was that he had twice as much myelin as regular people, but his head and his neuron count same size as everybody else. Okay, so all talent, for the most part, comes from practice, because how we build myelin is through operating at the edges of our abilities where we make mistakes, and that's by strengthening weaknesses, soliciting critical feedback, and then finally, ultimately, perfecting the fundamentals. The same thing is going to be true of AQ and CQ. So if you find that you're somebody who has a really fixed mindset, you're afraid of change, it's really hard for you to adapt. All you have to do is ask yourself this question. There are 4 things you can do, but I'll start with this. So the first thing you have to do is ask yourself this question. What could I almost do if I pushed as hard as possible? So let's say you're really uncomfortable with adaptation and change. What would that actually look like if you had to adapt today? Visualize it, the hardest thing that you think you could almost do, and then push until you get there. It's the same thing with running a marathon. So that's one. The next practice is engraving. This is a very simple practice. You basically watch other people do it. So if you are somebody who, for example, is not very good at asking questions, which a lot of people say is a challenge, or is not very good at learning, you don't like learning because you associate it with like K through 12 education, which is really bad and completely got you stuck, and so now you reject it, right? So look at the people who are really good at it and watch them. That's all you have to do. We're natural imitators. When we watch other people, we imitate them. So if you wanted to improve your tennis backhand, all you have to do is watch 20-minute videos of Maria Sharapova every day, and you would start having a backhand like hers. It's literally what works. So who is the most adaptable person you know? Who's the most agile person you know? Watch them. Deconstruct what they're doing. The same thing is true of curiosity and learning. So that's another tool that you can use. The other thing is just related to goal setting. What is your big goal when it comes to agility? Is it that you would be able to move laterally across your organization, like let's say across 5 departments? Okay, that's your goal. What are the steps that would need to be taken to get there? Forget the big goal, focus on the steps. Why is that? Because we get a dopamine hit when we list a big goal as if we've already done it. It's why people who say they're gonna run a marathon are less likely to do it than people who say they're gonna run tomorrow. So make sure you know all of the steps to get to the big goal. And then the 4th component of all of this is just really simple. How do you develop a daily practice? That's really where the stuff is. Like, we talk about prodigies all the time and people who are geniuses all the time. There's a lot of pressure on those people and they end up not performing because they can't hold to those standards. You look at Mozart and you say, okay, he wrote a symphony when he was 5 years old. He had 6,000 hours of practice, an abusive music teacher father, and no other option but to write music. He was practicing all the time. That's not a prodigy, that's somebody who learned how to practice. So just figure out, what would make you a better learner? Is it that you have a problem with focus? Then maybe you take up some meditation and mindfulness practice. Is it a problem with listening? Okay, let's use some active listening techniques. Is it a problem with actually just being able to process new information? Well, find another mode, maybe try experiential learning. So those are 4 tools you can use to grow in either category. Also happy to talk about this offline.
Other ones? They answered everything. You guys answered everything. We're all left just utterly speechless because we're gonna just walk out of here and just like go read 100 books and.
Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. We got our time. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're like, and scene. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, you guys. This has been great. We all appreciate you taking the time to meet with us, and thank you everyone for joining us, and hopefully you join us next month. But invite your friends. Like, we're always trying to grow the group.
Thank you for having us.
Oh my God, I don't.
I don't think so. I was talking to Ariadne over there. She runs a mindfulness practice.
Thank you so much for having us. Appreciate it.
Katie Campbell, Showpad.
I know.
Yeah. Stand on it. Nice to meet you.
So I'm gonna take 30 minutes to focus, but like I used to
Ladies,
it was so great to meet you.
so great to meet you. So fun being on the panel together.
Pooja, it was really nice to meet you.
Oh, a
Thank you so
pleasure to
much for
meet you
coming.
too. Thank you so much for hosting.
And
Still here.
I think we've worked together before. I don't know, but yeah, it was
Appreciate you.
This was a really fun event. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Sometimes people they have something they want to say, almost like an agenda. They're talking about a certain topic. You all came off like, you've been doing it for a while. Like, you know what I mean? Like
We have been doing it for a long time.
Well, it's like interesting even just hearing things that you laugh. Yeah. We'll wish them luck. Hey, good job. Hey guys. I had so many other questions, but you always know you're not gonna get to them. So it's like hard to decide. And like up there, like, okay, which one do I want? Like, what's the most important one? Yeah. I mean, I think they're all good. Yeah, I had like 10. How did you feel? I've done this kind of stuff a lot, but it's just not for this group. But yeah, no, it's great. I like how, like, you always, like, go to things like this and think, like, okay, you're just gonna, like, they're gonna be, like, you know, not as accessible. So I wanted to, like, ask questions to them, right? Like, yeah, I can read the title and I felt like everything, and I think it was pretty good. What did you think, Sal? Yeah?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay, let me see this Uber.
oh yeah, I've got it up. So you gotta zoom in a little bit.
I really want to see it.
Because it's such a long distance first, it's like this, and then it's just like a black dot of dry.
Should we do a picture with them?
We do. We definitely need to do. Oh yeah.
We should.
Before they leave.
Yeah, where did Katie? Oh, there's Katie.
Did it run out? Oh, no. Okay. Should we try helping out? I'm not just helping out a lot.
Yeah, picture. Yeah.
Oh, okay. He's got it. Yeah, it's so hard. Yeah.
Gotcha. So you're in your zone. Awesome. This sound down here. Nice.
Do you want to do an info?
Yeah.
What'd you name my bat?
This is great.
There were a couple of kids.